beautiful humans. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's an honor to have your attention in an era where attention is a scarcer resource than it has been historically. Let's make sure these slides are accessible. Aha, success. So today's talk will have some visuals. I love all of you visual learners. Is anyone here a visual learner like myself? All right, we've got a few. Kinesthetic learners, the dancers, the embodied people. Yes, I see you. So today, I want to share some of the tools that I've found most useful when we think about exponential technologies. A little bit about me, then we'll learn a little bit about each other. I am an artist and a technologist. I've been a professional dancer choreographer. I've worked in the design field. I've founded companies, one of the first drone cinematography companies. I have worked with massive organizations like IBM to scale design thinking globally, opening 29 design studios in 1 year. So culture change is very fascinating to me, and I think that's part of what we're all here to do, is to be a part of culture change. I've also worked in little rocket ship startups, raising 50 million to pioneer new interfaces. So has anyone here ever put on a VR, AR headset? All right, we've got a few. So have you used the gestural interfaces of today? I helped to pioneer those at Leap Motion in the early days, and my former CTO now runs Midjourney. My former lady in arms, VP of product, is now CTO at OpenAI. So we had a lot of these conversations about how technology should unfold, what are the incentives that power these extremely powerful systems that then shape our realities. And this talk hopefully will give us some tools to make sense of that together. I've framed it to be accessible to our youngest as well as our more mature and informed on the topic. So hopefully I can meet you all where you're at. But just so we can level set, please raise your hand if you view yourself as a technology expert. All right? If you're a founder, keep your arms raised. Okay? Show me if you're tech curious, but like don't really know much about it, but you'd like to learn more. All right, we've got a couple. And anyone who feels like they fall in the middle, like you, okay. Yeah, so we have a broad spectrum. And please bear with me as I try to speak to all these different levels today. Raise your hand if you view yourself as like a business person, okay? As a creative, primarily a creative, you can be both. Okay, wonderful. Is there anyone here who thinks of themselves as a community builder, community founder? Okay, yeah, if you're a business builder, you are building community. So these things are quite related. Okay. Today, so let me also tell you, most of my recent work, when I decided that I had some of my own opinions that I wanted to share specifically about the ethics of this technology, it was important not to be represented by a brand, because I had a fiduciary duty to the shareholders when I was representing a brand, especially in a leadership role. And my work at Singularity University has really allowed for the blossoming of some more critical ethical discussions. So that's a lot of the work I do today, is I essentially work with entrepreneurs, government leaders, family offices to prototype the future, to implement new technology. So I'll work in Dubai to build out what does the future of a city look like in Dubai, or I'll work in Johannesburg, South Africa to build immersive systems so that you can ensure greater safety in the mining industry. So if anyone has interest in those domains, come and talk to me. But what I want to share with you today are some of the tools that I often use when we're having those discussions at Singularity University. And if anyone isn't familiar with Ray Kurzweil, incredible futurist, he co-founded Singularity University. Yes, we appreciate him, amazing thinker. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at what does it mean to analyze technology through an exponential lens. There's a lot of new technologies we can discuss. Obviously, generative AI is the big one of the moment, virtual and augmented reality, we've got crypto, we've got decentralized technologies, but all of these have some core features. And I'm always very interested in what helps us see the interstitial nature of the thing that is unfolding, because those sorts of insights allow us to grapple with our reality today. So today, we're going to talk about the features of exponential technology, how you can relate this to your individual life, specifically in a nodal self-concept. So I am me, but I am also all the relationships that come together to form me. I am my community. I am part of my organization. I am shaping these things. I inter-am with all of these pieces. And then we're going to, if we have enough time, look at how do we identify future milestones using systems thinking. One thing I always like to begin with is that we are animals. Raise your hand if you know that you're an animal, not just a disembodied brain. Thank you. If your animal feels good, you are a much happier being. We are animals first and foremost, and our physical reality shapes our cognition. This is something that was discovered by neuroscientists, but we dancers have always known that the way that you embody the world shapes the way you understand the world. And so, what does that mean for us individually and collectively as we exist inside this currently ever increasingly digitalized future and current reality? This is a quick snapshot of our history, right? Here are our ancestors in the savannah experiencing reality in a physical way. Highly literal, very little abstraction. Here's the storefront of our grandparents' reality. And then here are the digital interfaces of today, Amazon shopping for whatever you might need. As we move from the literal to the abstract, we are increasing cognitive load. And so this is why your attention is such a scarce resource today and why it's such a gift that you guys are sitting here and giving it to me. Truly, the greatest gift you can give is this, what you're doing right now. But it has real consequences for the way that we navigate the world. This increase in information density increases multitasking, leads to the experience of information overload, and essentially causes us to need to check out. And what I want to help us do today is find paradigms that allow us to exist in this moment of accelerating rates of change. This is our reality right here. The way that technology proliferates has drastically shifted. You guys all know this. This shouldn't be news to any of you, but I think it's really important to ground here. I mean, you can look, I always find it very interesting, you know, the telephone, the adoption of the telephone has this like occasionally linear thing, but then you look at, for example, the TV, boom, shot up massively quickly, right? That was one of the first massive exponential curves. But today, whether you're talking tablets, smartphones, social media, MP3 players, we live in this rapid change. And it can be hard to contend with. Our biological systems are not built to make sense of the world in that way. So I'd like 2 volunteers. Any brave humans? Here's one brave human. Okay, come stand here. I need another brave human. Okay, come up, my dear. We're going to just embody this so that we can really viscerally understand it. You're going to stand right next to each other like you're running a race. Okay, but you have to face that way because you need some space. So I want, my dear with the sparkles on your forehead, what's your name? Rebecca. I want you to take 2 linear steps, and by that I mean 1, 2.
Okay.
Pause. And my dear, what is your name? Sarah. I would like you to take 2 exponential steps. Your first step, okay, there's your first step. Oh, okay. Now I'd like you both to take a second step, you in an exponential paradigm and you in a linear paradigm. All right, I don't think her leaps are gonna take her far enough. I'd like you to finish and take, I want you to take 30 steps total. You can take small ones. And just tell us when you're done. Does anyone have any idea? Jennifer, is it? I'm sorry, tell me your name one more time, my dear. Sarah, thank you, Sarah. Sarah, if you were to take 30 linear steps, do you know where you would end up? Any guesses? In the water. Any other guesses?
1 billion times.
We've got a person who's played with these concepts before. Any other guesses? Where would she end up? What would her trip be like if she kept taking 30 exponential steps?
Exhausting.
It would be exhausting.
The sun.
The sun. Excellent. She would circle the globe 26 times. You can both sit back down. I see a jaw drop. And that is appropriate. Our body is not built to make sense of exponential change. We are built to make sense of linear change. It is hard for us to predict exponential change. And that is what I want us to try to figure out how to do today. Because the fact that none of you just right off the cuff could say, she'd circle the globe 26 times, has huge implications for how we live in a time where everything around us is defined by exponential rates of change. Yes? Are we on the same page? Okay, so how do we deal with this? There's incremental change, and there's exponential change. And it has characteristics. And we all kind of intuitively, physically understand incremental change. I want us to understand what are the characteristics of exponential change, because we cannot rely on our intuition to get there. Hello. So our first tool we're going to learn today are the 6 Ds. We teach these at Singularity University. People pay a lot of money to come to our programs and learn about all this stuff, so you guys take it with you, use it, apply it to your lives. All right, what are these 6 Ds? I bet you guys already know some of them. The first critical characteristic and phase is digitization. This is the prerequisite for technology to achieve exponential growth according to Moore's law. If it cannot be digitized, it is not going to land on this exponential curve within our current paradigm. We can have some philosophical discussions later about whether there are other domains where that applies. But for the purposes of our talk, we're talking about things that are digitized. So let's take some examples. Give me an example of a concrete thing that became digital in our lives.
Money.
All right, yes. Another one. What did it become?
Bell.
Okay. What about like the thing that's hitting your ears right now so that you can make sense of what I'm saying?
Sound.
This is a sine wave. It used to be a sound wave, right? What about photographs? What did they become? PNG, right? Pixels, text to code. All of these are digital transformations. The internet is easily reproducible and divisible. Hardware, because according to Moore's law, is subject to performance doubling every few years. And then with Rose's law, which predicts a similar doubling in quantum computing, we have sort of the next up to bat once we run out of Moore's law, because quantum computing is our next massive frontier, which is very exciting, but we don't have time to talk about that today. Okay, so what are the other features? Digitization, the core first feature. What happens when you jump on this train, especially if you're adopting a new technology in your business, is, man, it's not actually, what's going on? It's not very useful. This is what happened with VR, AR, right? Like, oh man, it's such a gimmick. Why the slow start? This is like the trough of disillusionment, if you're aware of the Gartner hype curve. So the second feature of exponential technology is that it is deceptive. It will deceive you. Will it ever catch up, you say? I'm investing money in this new AI assistant, but it's not actually working very well. And then you ask yourself, which path are we on? Maybe we just adopted something that isn't actually very useful, because you haven't gotten to this point yet. And this point, where the 2 lines cross, is very critical, because this is our third major feature. Exponential technology is disruptive, and it happens overnight. This is the moment of shock and awe and chaos. Suddenly, boom, ChatGPT came out, and everyone was freaking out, and it was all over the news, and people were using it. And when I say people, I mean early adopters. We were talking earlier about using, open AI paradigms, but I want to reiterate that for many people, I grew up in a small town in West Texas, this is still not the norm. This is not even early majority yet, but it will be within a few years because we're on this exponential curve. So at that point, you become left behind if you haven't already been working with the technology. And I think this is an argument for dipping your toe in if you feel a little recalcitrant or afraid of these new technologies. Allow yourself the space to experience them, to get to know them on your own terms, to develop your own opinions so that you can stay present in what's unfolding around you, because they are shaping our world. So how do we deal with a disruptive technology like this? Well, Alan Kay said that the best way to predict the future is to invent it. And that's part of what we're doing here again, right? We're culture building. We want to build a system that has an underlying paradigm that is life-giving. We're going to talk about paradigmatic change in systems later, pinning that for the moment. But right now I want to give you some concrete examples from my lived experience of the last few features of exponential technology. So a lot of my work, little side note, as a dancer, it was very exciting for me to work in immersive digital interfaces because I have deep interest in embodiment, not only in the physical world, but also in the digital world, and how that relates to ethics, and how that relates to efficiencies, and how that relates to learning. My parents founded a Montessori school, so I'm a big believer in the Montessori ethos of I see and I forget, I hear and I remember, or I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, hence making you all slides. I do and I understand. So here is one example. This is a cave system. This was, I was in Berlin working with Rolls-Royce in 2018, and what was really incredible about this virtual environment is it created those amazing efficiencies. So essentially, on the left-hand side, you'll see us looking through a new warehouse design. And then on the right-hand side, we're reviewing and approving a new prototype before it goes into production for engines, airplane engines. And in this specific case, this review process would take 2 weeks. But once we were able to upload all of these 3D CAD drawings, it went from 2 weeks to 2 hours. You get everyone in the room, and suddenly you can work with that amazing biology that's been designed since we were living in the savannah, and we can intuitively understand and make sense of and identify challenges in a way that we are not as apt to do in other interfaces. So this is one thing I personally love about virtual environments is in some ways they are able to engage our animal instincts and our animal understanding in ways that, for example, the text-based paradigm that proliferated globally thanks to the printing press, amazing knowledge expansion paradigm, but we're still stuck in it. Like, why are we pecking away at these as if they're little rock tablets? Like that is not the paradigm that we should be using. It's not the most efficient, it's bad for our bodies. Okay, I'm gonna step away from that, Rachel. Okay, what's another feature of exponential technology? Does anyone have another one in mind? We've talked about how they're digital, they must be, right, to hop on the exponential curve. They're deceptive, they're disruptive. What's another one? Any ideas? Talked about dematerialization. I'm going to show you guys another example of dematerialization. This was IKEA Place, and Apple essentially allowed you, instead of like shipping stuff to your door and using all the carbon to get things from place to place, test it out in your home beforehand. My favorite version of this is Zenny. Does anyone here use Zenny glasses? Yeah, okay. If any of you are as bad as I am at keeping a hold of your glasses, you will love Zenny. I'm not promoting Zenny, but I love that they have an AR interface, so I can try on glasses with my phone and see what works. I don't have to go into a store. It's a great example of dematerialization because something physical, this pair of glasses, can land on my face because of the augmented reality interface that exists just because of my phone camera. So they've dematerialized that process. They've taken the shipping out of it in the IKEA Place plus Apple example here. Okay, here's another fun example. So quick backstory before I show it. I almost became a doctor, thank goodness I didn't. But here, like, love you all the doctors, thank you for your work. One of the realities of education as a doctor is that at some point you need to dissect a cadaver because you need that embodied learning of the human system. And cadavers, I hope this isn't triggering for anyone, are very difficult to source. They're very expensive. That's not available to all med school students all over the world. And so how do you enable that learning? Well, in a virtual world, you can dematerialize it and in that way democratize it. So here's something we built at Leap Motion. If anyone loves cats, this is a great interface. So I remember I was saying we pioneered gestural interfaces. So this is in the physical world, here's in the virtual world. So suddenly, you're able to understand the three-dimensionality of a creature in all of its layers of complexity. Other cat lovers out here? Fluffy was such a good sport. But this is free, right? I mean, you could make it a paid app, but the cost of learning with this can scale massively, it can scale globally. So that has a big social impact component as well because it can improve access and quality of education globally. And that's very exciting to me. And then the other really cool piece, we'll just for a minute chill here. The other very exciting piece to me is that we can make accessible concepts that previously are not very accessible. So it may allow you to fundamentally understand or touch a new world perceptually that is inaccessible to you in your everyday lived experience, right? Like, you've never seen a cat just shed its skin for you like that. You've never seen the way nutrients travel through a tree. Maybe you've imagined it, but we could build that. Oh man, we gotta go way faster. So we can democratize learning. Here's a great example from Embodied Labs called We Are Alfred that shows med students how aging can affect sight. And my grandmother has this particular visual degenerative condition. So getting to see this really changed the way I relate to her. Okay, moving forward. So we've got these 6 Ds. We've got the digital, the deceptive, the disruptive, the dematerialized, demonetized, and democratized. Now I want to teach you one more thing, and we're going to do a quick interactive session here. So, the futures wheel, tool number 2. Who has used a futures wheel before? Oh my God, they're so cool. Okay, so these are the implications of network effects. So we're going to talk about a change that happened to all of us, and we're going to popcorn style the discussion. Something happened during COVID. What was it? Everyone started doing their meetings on
Zoom.
Online, on Zoom, yes. So what were the first order consequences of that? What did that change? How did that change your world? What happened or didn't happen anymore? Stop wearing pants, fashion change. Yes, why did you stop wearing pants? Because you didn't have to go into the
Office.
Thank you. So you're working from home. What else happened? Oh, shucks. Saw your client's face. All right. So maybe kids started doing what online? School online. If someone got married or had to have a funeral, what happened? Webcast. So suddenly you had virtual events that never were virtual before. I went to 2 virtual funerals during COVID. It's kind of sad in some ways, but pretty cool in others. All right, what else did we do? What if you had to go to the doctor and get your prescription filled? What was telehealth? Boom. All right. And then suddenly, if you were on a remote team and you weren't already meeting all the time, that was enabled for you, for better or worse. Hope you didn't have crazy time zones. Okay, so what are the second order consequences of these changes? Let's go back to working from home. What did we do less of? Because we were driving. Thank you. What else did we do less of?
Less makeup.
Less pants, less makeup. Where did people move to?
Country.
The country. They moved to the suburbs. That's right. Where did they not live? The city. That's right. And what happened to the cafes and things in the downtown areas? Boom. That's right. All right. What happened to the mental health of kids who were doing all their school online and their teenagers? All right. I see you physically expressing this thought. Thank you, dancers, people. Mental health challenges. What else happened? What was exposed, especially among the youth?
The evil government.
All right, we're gonna pin that for later. Okay, there's this really important thing called the digital divide. Did anyone witness the digital divide become present? Suddenly, the kids who didn't have computers, it was revealed. If any of you had kids who had a hard time accessing technology, that was a big deal when everything was online. And suddenly you had greater access to certain things. MIT put a bunch of courses online. Khan Academy had already pioneered that. What happened to wonderful people like the people who run this event? What happened to all of our caterers?
Unemployed.
What's that?
Unemployed.
Unemployed. Major loss in revenue for our events people, even people who worked in restaurants. Really challenging time. Continues to be. The recovery has been long, right? And then in the healthcare sector, suddenly you needed new laws because you had all this information passing online. What are the third order effects of some of these things?
More remote work options.
More remote work options, that's huge. I know someone who would only hire the wives of military people, or like the partners of military people, because they realized they could get incredible skill in the middle of nowhere. Other things. I just put one up there, new security protocols, right? All this health data's online.
Less human connection.
Less human connection. What was a big one? I already put it up because of the no driving, right? Huge third order consequence. A lot of the national parks closed. Regeneration of nature in some domains. What happened to the suburbs? Suddenly they had all these new people, so what happened to their infrastructure? Major stress, especially in the water systems. Okay, I'm gonna go through these quickly now. So Property values changed because of that whole downtown to suburbs thing. Places closed. We talked about the restaurants and the workers. We had new learning paradigms, more self-directed learning. So all of these, this is how you make a futures wheel. And we don't have time today, but usually when I teach this in a workshop, next we'll do a forecast. We'll take like one aspect of generative AI. I would encourage you, this is your take-home homework for you type A weirdos who are sitting in this crowd. I see you. Try a futures wheel. Look at one thing that's changing in the world around you, and then take it layer by layer by layer. First order consequence, second order consequence, third order consequence. This is how you build your muscle as a systems thinker, and that is required of us in today's world. We have to understand the ecosystem of change that we exist within. So this is the second of the tools. So now let's apply the first tool. Let's apply the 6 Ds to the futures wheel. Does anyone remember any of those Ds? Yell them out.
Decentralized.
Disruption. Digitization. Democratization, that's my favorite one. Demonetization, dematerialization. So let's take them one by one. What was digitized here? Everything.
Meetings.
Work, great. Give me 2. We're going to get to do 2 for each one. Work was digitized. What else? Healthcare, great. What was deceptive about this? Did everyone expect property values to change the way they did? Right? Like, that was a little weird. People are still recovering from that too. What else was deceptive?
It seems like things were more accessible, but the digital gap actually.
Digital divide, exactly, the digital divide. What was disrupted? What industries?
Anything in person.
Anything in person. Yeah, events, right? We talked about events. Logistics. Even hiring, HR, right? Like, we could build out this futures wheels more and more with all the things that were disrupted by this simple little one change. What was demonetized? What used to cost money but now doesn't?
Information.
Yeah, we continued that trend. That's true. Information.
Office space.
Office space, yes, excellent. I know a real estate company that started training all of its real estate agents in a virtual world. They no longer have to pay for that overhead. It's a big deal. All right, we're gonna keep moving. What was dematerialized? These two are interrelated. Used to be a physical thing, now it's an ephemeral thing. What? Cash, more and more of that, yes. It definitely drove adoption of digital interfaces for money. Anything else? One more? Events, yeah. Used to be physical, now you're in a virtual world. You give up a lot, but you also gain some things. Okay, and then democratization. Access to education, if you're not stuck in the digital divide. A lot of things were democratized through this process. Okay, the third thing I really want to, I've mentioned this a couple times in this talk, but having this frame is very helpful when you're building a futures wheel. Because you can think of it in terms of whether you're wearing pants or not. You can also think of it in terms of whether your family can do their schoolwork. You can also think of it in terms of whether you can outsource all your training to a virtual world. You can also think of it in terms of how the property price is going to affect your neighbors. You can think of it in terms of what does this mean for dating? What does this mean for the security of information online, right? Like, you can think of it in terms of CO2 emissions. Every single one of these can be mapped to this futures wheel. And I would encourage us to try to push our thinking out of this place. We're very good at this, but this is just as real. So I'm gonna leave that one there. We could do a whole talk on that, but we're gonna leave it for now. Okay. Usually I'll make you guys run through one, but we don't have time for it today. If you want to play with some thought experiments, you can come find me afterwards. So the next step that we would do is we would look at what's an innovation, and then we try to actually plot it on a timeline. Give it a good guess. When does that change happen? When do the ethical concerns arise with artists' work being referenced in generative AI? When is the graphic designer job displaced, and for what purpose, right? Plot it out. That concretizes it. It makes it real. It makes you stare it in the face in a way that is harder to do if you put it on a timeline. And it's a thought experiment, but it will prove your thinking. So I'm going to close with 2 more concepts that I really love. The trim tab, any pilots in the house? Oh my God, I really want to learn to fly. That would be so fun. But CO2 is, anyway, okay. Trim tab, a point in a system where minimum effort creates the maximum effect. Something to keep in mind in that Zoom reality, that one little change, massive ecosystem effect. So what are the trim tabs in your life? What is a one change you can make that will directionally reroute you? Maybe plot you onto a 10x curve as opposed to a 1-to-1 linear curve. Are we gonna make incremental change, or are we gonna make paradigmatic shift change in our way we live our lives, in the way we relate to our family, in the way we try to show up day to day? And then I'm gonna show you this one cool concept. Amanda Joy Ravenhill, follow her on Instagram, she's so brilliant. She used to lead Buckminster Fuller Institute. But this is, Dana Meadows wrote a wonderful book on systems, but she made it accessible by creating this beautiful visual chart. So what I wanna point out here is that if you wanna change something that's a system, not a simple one-to-one, there are ways to do it. Some of them are easy, some of them are challenging. Some of them are not very effective. Some of them are super effective. The most effective is to transcend a paradigm, to change the mindset, to restructure the goals of the system. Earlier, I believe it might have been you, someone asked about energy consumption when we were talking about OpenAI and open source AI. And there was a discussion about whether the economic incentives drive the change or the ethical incentives drive the change. What if the goals of the system were different? What if the goals of the system were about ethics as opposed to economics, right? We don't live in that reality currently, but we can make choices in our own ecosystems, the organizations we run, et cetera, where we can realign incentives and goals. We can make these little tiny linear changes, change taxes or subsidies. That'll create a minor push, easier to implement, not as effective. So I love this map when you're thinking about how do we actually start to pull the levers of a system and find the levers of maximum change. Okay, I'm gonna close with one of my favorite quotes. Who's this dude? I referenced him earlier, actually. Ding, ding, that's the time to go. This is Buckminster Fuller, built one of the first flying cars. Yeah, I know. If you wanna teach people a new way of thinking, don't try to teach them. Give them a tool, the use of which will lead to new ways of thinking. So my hope for all of you is that you don't take what I've said for granted. You try out these tools. Try to identify the 6 Ds of exponential technology when you're looking at tech.
You did good.
Thank you guys so much. That's me on some social media. Feel free to come find me later. And thank you, Angel, for inviting me.